begins now. Here's Vegas Vic.
Hello and welcome to our show. Both the high-only Omaha and the high-low split games are not only popular, particularly in Europe, but are excellent games to play. In fact, one of my personal favorites of all poker games is Pot Limit Omaha High-Low Split. As with Omaha High-Only, there are also significant differences between the limit game and the pot limit game. To find out about them, let's go to the table. In our program on Omaha High, we discussed many of the differences between limit and pot limit games. Many of these also apply to Omaha 8. In limit Omaha 8, many players will also be seeing the flop and the turn and the river, because now these players also have opportunities to at least win one half of the pot, or at least so they think. Unfortunately, thinking this way is a prescription for disaster. Many players habitually overplay marginal and mediocre hands, including draws that are not the nuts. This contributes not only to the volatility of the game, but also to the profitability for players with sufficient discipline and solid starting hand selection. Pot limit Omaha 8 games are somewhat less volatile, but because it is possible to win two ways, there are still players who will continue to play past the flop with a greater variety of hands, and therefore there will be more players to the turn and river, most of the time resulting in multiplayer showdowns. However, because of the nature of Omaha 8, this is not necessarily a bad situation. To help you with some of the most important strategic concepts, we have set up several examples to demonstrate the majority of situations you will face when playing limit and pot limit Omaha 8. The first of these is the high card flop. Whenever the flop hits with high cards only, or at least cards with rank above 8, this means that there is no possibility for the low, and therefore all players will effectively be playing Omaha High. Therefore, if you begin with low cards, it should be obvious that they are no longer good, and you should therefore muck those hands. Even though it is infrequent, coordinated flops of unpaired cards to the same suit do happen. While in Texas Hold'em, flops like this do not generally mean that any player has actually flopped a flush, the exact opposite is the case for Omaha. It is much more common that the board will contain 2 flush cards rather than 3. If this is the case, it is a near certainty that at least one of your opponents is drawing to a flush. If 3 low cards of the rank of 8 or lower hit the flop, you now have to decide whether or not your hand matches this flop. While it could be that you actually flopped the nut low, if you play the good starting hands, more often than not you will flop a low hand with a draw to the nuts, but not necessarily the nuts itself. This is actually good, especially if your starting hand and the flop also coordinate for high hand potential. Although this does not happen frequently, whenever the flop contains a pair in any Omaha game, you immediately have to consider the possibility that someone has flopped quads. This also applies to any pair on the board whenever that is dealt, be it on the turn or the river. However, the greatest danger with a paired board comes from the high possibility of a full house. If you're not the one that has flopped the quads or full house, chances are that someone else has. The odds of this increase the more players there are still in the game to that point. Such situations will occur more frequently in limit Omaha and less often in pot limit games. Sometimes you will see 3 cards on the flop that are connected to each other, such as for example 3, 4, 5. Now there is a straight potential, and if they are suited, a flush possibility as well as the straight flush potential. With a flop like this, it is also possible and even quite probable that someone has already flopped the nut low. Flops containing 3 sequenced cards will not be that common. More often than not, the cards that flop will contain gappers. By that I mean hands such as 8, 9, Jack, with the 10 being the gapper in between. Any such combination of cards on the flop that contains maybe straights with gaps in between are very dangerous, particularly if no low hand is possible. If you don't have cards in your hand that fill the gap and combine with another card or cards in your hand that can complete such a straight, or at least one other potential such as a flopped set, your hand should be headed for the muck. If you don't flop the best hand, either the low or the high, or preferably the best low with the best high hand potential, then you should at least flop hands that can make either the best high hand or the best low hand. Therefore, if you don't flop a hand that meets this criteria, most of the time you should not play past the flop. Since Omaha 8 is a high-low split game, The best strategic approach is to select starting hands with the best potential to win both sides of the pot. Although you won't always get the most premium and perfect hands, as a general advice, you should play more low hands with high hand potential as opposed to high hands only. The ratio is 2/3 to 1/3 for the simple reason that good low hands in this game can quite often become high hands, while high hands can never become low hands. To help you better understand exactly how this works and how it will impact your approach to the game, as well as your success and profitability, we will now show you a few examples and give you some of the statistics that provide a clear indication of why Omaha 8 games require that you play fewer hands and much better hands than the majority of players actually think is the case. If amongst your starting 4 cards you only have 2 low cards, such as Ace, 2, King, Queen in our example, your statistical chances of making a winning hand are as follows. Before the flop, you have a 25% chance of winning. If you flop 1 low card, you have a 16% chance of winning. And if you flop 2 low cards, you have a 60% chance of winning. If amongst your 4 whole cards you have all low cards, such as the Ace, 2, 3, 4 in our example, your statistical chances of making a winning hand are as follows. Before the flop, you have a 50% chance of winning. If you flop 1 low card, you have a 24% chance of winning. And if you flop 2 low cards, you have a 69% chance of winning. If amongst your 4 whole cards, your starting hand consists of 3 low cards only and an unmatched dead card, such as in the Ace, 2, 3, 9 in our example, your statistical chances of making a winning hand are as follows. Before the flop, you have a 39% chance of winning. If you flop 1 low card, you have a 27% chance of winning. And if you flop 2 low cards, you have a 72% chance of winning. All of these statistics are, of course, for the low hand only. It is quite pointless to try to do this for the high hands as well, because the object in Omaha 8 is not to play this game in the same way as you would play Omaha High only, but to play it for the game it is, and that is the high-low split game. In this game, you should almost never enter the pot unless you have very good low starting hands prior to the flop and improving those on the flop as best as possible, and, if not, to have the discipline to fold. In any high-low split game, your most profitable opportunities are in circumstances where you can scoop the pot. If that is not possible, then the next best thing is to at least exploit either the high or the low side when you are as certain as possible that most of your opponents appear to be playing for the other side of the pot. In this way, you can maximize your win on one side of the pot, and sometimes even in circumstances where you are likely to be quartered with another player. And that's where the importance of your initial hand selection criteria comes fully into focus. For now, and until next time, remember to play smart and play to win. I'm Victor H. Royer, and this has been a presentation of PartyPoker.com. Bye.
This has been a presentation of MRM Entertainment Inc. in association with Nevada Production Studios and PartyPoker.com.